think of waiting as a bridge connecting departure to destination. We wait for the kettle to boil, the rain to stop, the phone to ring, or a late email to arrive. In these ordinary moments, waiting is defined entirely by its termination, a passive endurance of the interval before fulfillment. But what happens when the bridge never reaches the other side? When the span juts blindly over an abyss and the horizon refuses to yield what we seek? Waiting without resolution is not a transition. It is an entirely new geography. It is the sudden discovery that the waiting room is actually the main auditorium. Inhabiting this space requires a profound recalibration of the mind, a shifting of weight from the balls of the feet ready to spring forward to the heels, grounded firmly in a heavy, permanent present. In the architecture of an unresolved wait, time loses linear momentum and begins to pool. It turns inward, deepening rather than progressing. Minutes no longer march toward an hour, they stack, increasing the atmospheric pressure of the room. You become acutely aware of dust motes suspended in light, the hum of the refrigerator, and the indifferent ticking of a clock measuring only duration, not progress. In standard time, we live in the future tense, throwing thoughts ahead to prepare for what comes next. But when resolution is removed, the future collapses. There is no next, only an elongated now that refuses to dilute itself. This can feel like a claustrophobic prison, but it carries a strange, terrifying purity. Stripped of anticipation, the mind is forced to confront the immediacy of its own existence, naked and unadorned. A distinct psychological evolution occurs within this suspended animation. In the beginning, there is acute anxiety, a buzzing restlessness, fueled by the conviction that resolution is just around the corner if we wish fiercely enough. This is the era of bargains and omens, where any minor event is interpreted as a sign that the wait is ending. But as days bleed into months, this high-strung hope phrase, it is replaced not by despair, which is an active emotion, but by a quiet neutrality. The sharp edge of expectation blunts. You stop checking the door, refreshing the screen, or holding your breath. This is the phase of accommodation, where the unresolved state ceases to be an interruption and becomes your life. The traveler stops looking at the map and builds a shelter out of the luggage. Human culture is deeply uncomfortable with the lack of an ending. We are narrative creatures, hardwired to seek climaxes, closures, and neat denouements. Every story reinforces the myth that all tension must find its release. When trapped in a scenario that refuses to resolve, we experience existential vertigo. Society looks at the person who waits without an end and sees a tragedy or a failure of agency. We are told to move on, find closure, or take control of the narrative. But these injunctions misunderstand profound suspensions. Some waits are not choices, they are conditions of being. To force a resolution where none exists is to manufacture a false ending, just to satisfy our craving for symmetry. There is a quiet dignity in refusing to fake a conclusion, in allowing the sentence to remain unfinished. Consider the landscape of the horizon when no arrival is expected. In a conventional wait, the horizon is a magnet, pulling our gaze forward with restless longing. But when the wait becomes permanent, the horizon ceases to be a destination and transforms into a mirror. Without an external event to focus on, attention is deflected back upon ourselves. We are forced to look at the internal architecture we usually ignore while hurrying toward our goals. Who are we when we are not progressing or arriving? The unresolved wait strips away external markers of identity, the titles, the plans, the destinations, and leaves only the core self, sitting quietly in the dark. It is an uncomfortable confrontation, which is precisely why we dread the unresolved. It robs us of distractions and leaves us alone with ourselves. Yet within this stagnation, a subtle alchemy can occur. When you abandon the expectation of an ending, the nature of the present changes. It ceases to be an obstacle to overcome, a boring interlude before real life begins. Instead, the details of the present take on a strange, luminous clarity. Because you are no longer looking past the room, you begin to truly see it. The texture of the upholstery, the shade of gray in the sky, the complex cadence of your breathing, all of these mundane realities expand to fill the vacuum left by the absent future. It is a form of involuntary mindfulness. You learn to inhabit the silence, not as an absence of sound, but as a presence. It is a heavy peace, born from the total surrender of control. This suspension also changes our relationship with hope. Normal hope is transactional, tied to an outcome. It is a bet placed on the future, a belief that things will turn out a certain way. But when waiting has no resolution, transactional hope becomes a form of torture, a recurring disappointment that wears away the spirit. In its place, a non-referential hope must be born. This is a hope that does not look forward to a specific rescue, but instead looks downward, rooting itself in the mere fact of survival. It is the belief that the present moment, however static, is sufficient. It is the willingness to exist in the question without demanding the answer. This is not a passive surrender to defeat, but an active engagement with uncertainty. Ultimately, to wait without resolution is to live in the truest state of human reality. We fool ourselves into thinking life is a series of solved problems, but the larger truth is that we are all suspended in a massive, cosmic interim. We are waiting on things we cannot name, for changes we cannot predict, in a universe that offers no guarantees of a neat conclusion. The unresolved wait is not an anomaly. It is the baseline of existence. When we learn to navigate its quiet, uncharted waters without panicked splashing, we are learning how to truly live. We stop demanding that the world explain itself or come with an answer key. We learn to exist comfortably within the ellipsis, acknowledging that the beauty of the piece may not lie in the final note, but in the long, resonant vibration of the chord that never quite fades away.